Introduction. A champion's body broken once more. Chris Froome has always lived on the knife edge of cycling risk. From his terrifying 2019 Dauphine crash that left him with multiple fractures, to years of rehab and attempts at comebacks, his body has absorbed the punishment of a dozen lifetimes. Yet just as he began to talk about one final swan song in 2025, reality has struck again. Violently. On August 28, 2025, during a solo training ride near Toulon, Froome suffered another devastating accident. He was then airlifted to hospital and underwent surgery after scans revealed the following: collapsed lung, 5 broken ribs, a fractured lumbar vertebrae. At 40 years old, Froome is no longer a rider in his prime. Recovery from such trauma is daunting for a 25-year-old, but for someone with his medical history, it may be impossible. This piece looks into why, based on medical literature, expert opinions, and historical precedent, this crash could finally mark the end of Chris Froome's extraordinary career. The collapsed lung, a silent killer of endurance. What is a pneumothorax? A pneumothorax occurs when air leaks into the space between the lung and the chest wall, causing the lung to collapse. It can be partial or total, but even a partial collapse is significant. It restricts the oxygen uptake, and for endurance athletes, oxygen is not just necessary, it's the essence of their very performance. According to the Cleveland Clinic, quote, some serious complications, including respiratory failure, infection, recovery time may vary. Full recovery is not guaranteed. For Froome, who depends on perfect lung function to climb mountains at threshold, this is bad. Risk of recurrence. Perhaps the most alarming fact is the high risk of reoccurrence. Harvard Health Publishing's Howard E. Elwine, MD, explains, quote, once a collapsed lung has re-expanded and healed, there is usually no long-term effect on your health. However, up to 50% of people have a lung collapse again. That figure alone should terrify any endurance athlete. Even if Froome heals fully, every time he mounts a bike at 400 watts or even 100 watts, the spectre of another collapsed lung hangs over him. How it affects aerobic performance. Lung capacity is central to VO2 max. The oxygen uptake measures that underpins cycling success. Even a 5 to 10% reduction in his lung capacity can destroy competitiveness at the World Tour level. Unlike recreational cyclists, pros ride at the margins of human capacity, where even tiny deficits are fatal to your performance. Medical literature warns that post-pneumothorax scarring, pleural thickening, and subtle capacity loss are common, especially after traumatic cases caused by rib fractures piercing lung tissue, as in Froome's crash. Even if his lungs heal, Froome may never again breathe as freely as he once did. Broken ribs. Pain that lingers longer than you think. Ribs are not just protective, they move constantly with every breath. A rib fracture causes searing pain with each inhale, cough, or twist of your body. For cyclists hunched over handlebars for 5 hours, this pain is magnified exponentially. According to the Mayo Clinic, quote, most broken ribs heal on their own in about 6 weeks, but pain can last longer, and activity may be restricted for months. Now multiply that by 5 ribs, plus the fact that one fractured likely caused Froome's pneumothorax. Breathing will remain painful for months, limiting his ability to train at intensity, precisely when his contract and career demand urgency. The lumbar vertebrae fracture, the spine's silent sentence. Why the spine matters most in this case. If the lung is the engine, the spine is the chassis. Without spinal stability, no cyclist can maintain aerodynamic posture, climb efficiently, or transfer power from legs to pedals. Froome's fracture to a lumbar vertebrae threatens all of these. What the research says, a systemic review of elite athletes who underwent lumbar surgery concluded, quote, 75 to 100% of athletes were able to return to elite competition. Career length averaged 2.6 to 4.8 years with variable performance levels. This sounds hopeful, I guess, until you note the performance often dropped to 64 or 104% of pre-injury levels. For a 25-year-old with a decade ahead, that's manageable kind of, especially if you're not on an elite level, but for Froome at 40, it's catastrophic. Even if he returns, his peak will probably be behind him a long way now. Pain and nerve risk. Spinal fractures can also cause chronic nerve pain, disc degeneration, or spinal stenosis, conditions incompatible with riding 6-hour training days. Unlike bones in the arm or collarbone, vertebrae don't just, quote, knit back together. They are load-bearing, motion-essential structures. Every pedal stroke will test Froome's lumbar vertebrae for the rest of his life. The cumulative toll. Why age matters. Elite cyclists already balance precariously on the edge of overuse injuries. Froome at 40 is well beyond the average peak age of Grand Tour winners, which currently lies around 26 to 32. Healing slows with age, bone density decreases, and lung elasticity weakens. For context, when Andy Schleck fractured his pelvis at 27, he never returned to Tour de France form. Froome's body was endured far greater punishment, and at an older age. The combination of prior 2019 crash with multiple fractures and long rehab, now a fresh lung and spinal trauma, the natural decline of age, and forms an incredible, almost unsurmountable barrier to a return to the World Tour level. Real-world examples of similar injuries. Alejandro Valverde crashed in the 2017 Tour, breaking his kneecap. Though he returned, he was never the same GC contender. Fabio Sartorelli tragically died from head trauma, reminding us that cycling injuries can have lifelong consequences. Andrew Talansky retired early due to chronic back pain, a less severe condition than Froome now faces. All proves that once the spine or lungs are compromised, careers rarely recover. What doctors say about athletes with these injuries? Dr. Brian Kavanagh, University of Toronto, on pneumothorax in athletes. Quote, reoccurrence is common, and for those engaged in strenuous activity, the risk of another collapse is increased. Dr. Michael Fellings, Toronto Western Hospital, neurosurgeon, on spinal trauma. Quote, even when fractures heal, athletes are often left with long-term pain or biomechanical limitations. Cleveland Clinic also said, quote, recovery depends on the severity of collapse. For athletes, even small residual impairment can significantly affect endurance. Froome's contractual and competitive reality. Premier Tech signed Froome hoping for a late career revival. Instead, they've endured years of subpar results. His contract expires in 2025, and with these injuries, renewal is almost impossible. Even if Froome desires one last Tour de France, sponsors, teams, and selectors will hesitate. No one builds a tour squad around a rider with a collapsed lung and fractured spine just months prior. Let's just make one thing clear though. I know this video is very early for what's happened considering, but the truth is we have to get through the recovery phase first. Chris Froome and his fans are going to be waiting to see how the recovery went after the surgery, and of course I agree that is the most important thing. The fact that he can go home to his family versus compete as a pro cyclist, I mean, the latter is way more important. Let's just say that being in a family is so important, and I guess his competition days are over. Thanks for watching today's video. If you're new here, please subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with the latest cycling news, cycling drama, and cycling results. Also, don't forget to leave a like on this video for good luck. And if you haven't already, scroll to the bottom of this video and comment down below your opinions on this topic, and if you have any information that we haven't heard of regarding Chris Froome's accident or his recovery after the surgery.